Good morning. I'm with Marilyn Hawes this morning, who I've known for a number of years now. Marilyn is the founder of a community interest company called Freedom from Abuse. And I'm just going to hand you over to Marilyn straight away because Marilyn straight away because she has a story which for anybody who lives a normal life is actually quite frightening because it can happen to anybody. So Marilyn, just talk through how you came to find yourself in the situation where you are now, if you like.
Well, yes, it's a tsunami happened in a heartbeat. You never know. You get up one morning and you go about your work, your daily life, and then ding dong on the doorbell. Going back now nearly 20 years, there's the police from another county who'd had permission to come into my county, and in they walked, and 9 hours later they walked out, having told me they were strongly suspecting that my former boss at the school where I was deputy head and he was head, he'd been my boss for 10 years. He'd been my good friend, my very best friend, I would say, for 17 years. They were investigating him for paedophilia, and they believed that my 3 sons had been part of his attraction, shall we say. From that moment, my life just went on to a completely different trajectory. My oldest son came home. He'd come out of university. He was then 20, 21, saving up for his gap year. He was interviewed separately to me because being over 18, my twins went in separately, and they were just going into year 12, so they were 16. They went in separately, and as I say, 9 hours later they left, with the police telling me that they believed they had all been sexually abused. Their stories didn't pin together. They were showing signs of misplaced loyalty, which is a classic sign. Their stories, when they asked the same questions, were like hedged and not the same. And then they said, we believe definitely you've been groomed. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. What's this grooming? And they said, well, it's basically working on you through, making an association with you where over time they've slid into your life. I say they hijack your life now. Fast forward many years, they literally do hijack your life. They hijack all your emotions. They close you down so that you are then basically you're their puppet and they are your default, and you find yourself just moving away from your closest friends. And that's the whole sign of the game, playing one thing against off another to try and make you in that tight circle where they can then groom you even closer and then move in when the first opportunity comes along, which is what he did.
You said he was a good. You said he was a good friend.
Oh, yeah. I mean, honestly, he wasn't some funny old man that lived down the road. He was an attractive man. A lot of the mothers fancied him. He was good looking. He lived in a house where there were other people. It wasn't like, and he would have my boys, because when I was going through my divorce, there was domestic abuse and I needed to get out. So a colleague of mine, who was another school friend of mine, said, look, come and move in with me. So my older children went there, and he said, well, look, I can take the twins. There were other people around. It wasn't just him. There was an elderly lady that lived there, another lady that lived there. So, I'd known him all those years. I met him in the church. Why wouldn't I trust him? And of course, that's the whole thing. And then I had a massive breakdown when I realized that he had gone to the court and he'd said he was guilty at the magistrate's court. That then went to the Crown Court. And then he said he was guilty, but he walked away with a £200 fine, a suspended sentence, when in fact he'd admitted to sexually abusing his boys and others, and others across his career. And I was so incensed. At this time, I was really unwell. I couldn't function, and I wasn't allowed to go to the court. So when the police phoned me and said, well, basically, he's walked away. And as soon as we saw this particular judge, we knew that he would walk, because this judge has done it before. Well, of course, that really enraged me. So I said, well, that's not good enough. I said, he's going down. I'm telling you, he's going down. I'm getting him put away. And they said, you can't do that. You'll be in contempt of court. I said, I don't care. I said, everything that my life was based on has been absolutely wrecked. Well, that's how it feels right now. So I said, he's not getting away with this. If the boys want me to actually do something about this, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go for it. So I did. And I said to the boys, look, we have an unusual surname, Hawes. As you grow older, you're going to be in business. It's a memorable name. So if you don't want me to do anything, I won't. But if you think this is not right, then I'm prepared to fight it. So I said, Mum, go for it, go for it. And so I did. And from that, I sort of became a media whore, if you like, because no other person had ever gone to the High Court of Appeal, making the appeal in their own name. I had no lawyer involved. And I won. And I had Harriet Harman sat in the High Court of Appeal next to me. And when he went down, he should have had 4 years. He got 18 months. It's a joke, isn't it? And I thought, well, I don't care. He's still going down. And she said to me, and the boys were with me, and my husband was with me. And she said, oh, you might want to put some lipstick on before you go out of the court. So I said, why? She said, because basically the world's press is there. I said, what? I said, what? She said, no one has ever done what you've done. Nobody actually just picked up the ball and ran with it and wrote to everybody and made their own case and then got it into the High Court. There's no reason why people can't, but people don't. And you're the first person that has. So it was quite remarkable. And then that made, you've got to think you're going back nearly 20 years when nobody was talking about this stuff.
I was going to ask, actually, if it happened today, would you still have the same fight?
No. Would I have the same fight? Yes. Because these stupid sentences still happen. Yes. I still appeal for other people. I read the papers and I'll say, that's not right. That's unduly lenient. And of course, but the sexual offences sentencing has increased now, and I've always been campaigning for that to happen. Doesn't do any good. Trouble is they network when they're in there, you see, and if they're sexual abusers, paedophiles, they still keep grooming. They'll groom other officers if they can. They'll groom each other as well. It doesn't stop. But the people who have had to suffer this, and it's life-changing, their life has changed. It's a life sentence for them, but having said that, you can go and bury yourself down a dark hole. I thought, or you can come out the other side of it. Now, I was a wreck, absolute wreck. So I won my case. I wrote my book. I started going into prisons, talking about child abusers, because I just couldn't understand anything about it, because this was an anathema to what I'd had in my own training as a teacher. It was always stranger danger. Don't talk to the funny man in the park, don't take sweets, don't pick up someone's kitten, don't get in a car. End of. And I thought, that's my job done. I had no idea. We weren't even trained about family abuse, incest. We never had that on our training. So the whole thing was almost a new experience. Shocking to say when you think this is only 18-20 years ago. But I learned an awful lot, and I thought, right, what can I do with this? But I was just desperate to find out more and try and stop it. And I was just taking more and more tablets. And one day we went out to dinner to a neighbour's house, and there was an off-duty police officer there who, in fact, was a neighbour of mine who was a child protection officer. And he asked me over dinner, there must have been 8 people at the dinner table, and he asked me, he said, how are you? And I said, oh, I'm fine, I'm absolutely fine. He said, you can't be. I said, I'm fine. But what he didn't know was, this was a Saturday night, but on the Tuesday, I had worked out how exactly I was going to take my own life. And I had stocked up on paracetamol and all of that, because I knew on the Tuesday, everybody would be out and I could do it. And that gave me relief. And so I felt happy, because people go on about, taking your own life is selfish. You don't think like that. If you've looked down that dark pit, it's a horror story of bleakness, and you are mentally ill. You don't think about it being selfish or not. It's not on your radar. It's about, there's a shame in what's happened. I am responsible for what's happened. My children have been sexually abused. I mean, gracious, I married their father. It was domestic abuse. I've made all these wrong decisions, and everybody's going to be better off without me. And you genuinely believe that. So when people say, oh, that person's selfish, they didn't think, no, you don't, because it doesn't work like that. You're thinking on a completely different plane, and it's nothing to do with healthy thinking. You honestly think you're doing the other people in your life a favor, and it's just not like that. So I then went to the cloakroom in this person's house, and when I came out, this guy was waiting there, and he said, I know what you're thinking of doing, and I'm going to tell your husband. I said, you haven't got a clue. You don't know what I'm doing. He said, I do. He said, because I deal with cases like this all the time. And I'm going to warn him that I think you're going to try and harm yourself. Well, I panicked. Then I just ran out the house, and I sat under, I still remember the name. His name was Gareth. He actually saved my life. I sat under a street lamp outside my house on the pavement, and I wept like a baby. And I said, I've only planned how to die. I don't know how to live. And that was just, where do I start? Anyway, my husband Roger found out, and we went off to see a psychiatrist. And this psychiatrist, Canadian guy, I'll never forget him. He never even charged me. He just said, what do you want? I can't do the accent. And I said, I want my life back. And he said, you can't have it back. And I said, well, that's not good enough. I want my life back. This man wrecked my life, and I don't know where to start. And he said, okay. And he was really brutal, but I still use what he said. He said, it's past, it's over. You can't change it. All you can change is the now and the going forward. But, basically, he said, what did this man do? He threw you out of an aircraft at 40,000 feet without a parachute. Now, if that was physical brokenness, you'd be all up to your neck in a plaster cast, being wheeled around. People would be opening your doors, doing your shopping for you. Are you okay? But that brokenness is on the inside, and nobody can see it. Now, if they're clever, they will understand in your behaviors. But I think you're a pretty good actress, which I was. And he said, so what are we going to do? You can either sink in a dark pit, or he said, I think you're stronger than you think you are. Or you can turn this into an opportunity, which it feels like you're doing, to take your pain. And there is a wonderful saying, which I only found the other day, but it's true. Out of pain comes our greatest calling. So I have done freedom from abuse for the last 18 years, based on that awful pain. And you can either sink or you can swim. And I decided that man, which is what Gareth, the police officer, said, what he's done to your life, if you take your life, he's not worth that much respect. He's not worth a lump of dog poo on your shoe. Don't give him that much respect. Don't let him still be controlling you. And he was right. So this guy said to me, I said, well, I don't know where to start. This Canadian psychiatrist, I don't know where to start. He said, okay, basically, in this brokenness that's inside you is all these broken blood vessels and muscles and tendons. Is an absolute mess. But he said, essentially in it is your DNA. Now, when you rebuild yourself, it's your choice. You can or you can't. You can be a victim mentality, or you can overcome it, because it has ended. And you have secured a wonderful outcome. So that man's in prison. Your children have got justice. The power of what you've done is amazing. So he said, be empowered by what you've done, because it's empowering what you've done, and take that and say, wow. But he said, you can look at your DNA and say, when you were a little girl, because that DNA is still in there, what was it that motivated you? And I said, it's easy peasy. I said, animals, always, nature, and music, because I was a music teacher. He said, right, fine, go and buy yourself a puppy. That will also build up your trust. It will get you outside the house. It will get you walking in nature, and go back to playing the piano again. Just do that. Just do that and see where it leads you, because that is the essence of Marilyn. And so we got a black Labrador puppy, and he was oh my golly, he was just when he died, a little bit of my heart went with him. But what do animals do? They repair you. Dogs and horses have an amygdala. They have a limbic system. That's why they emotionally connect with us as human beings. That's why they are so powerful for us to recover. And that puppy dog, Max, his name was, he knew every mood swing I had. He was just there. And I mean, Americans are brilliant at this, aren't they? They say an animal improves your emotional health by 30%. And it does. They do, especially horses and dogs. So I went with that. Yes, I started going out more, blah, blah, blah. And I went back to a different sort of teaching, because I was then standing in front of adults and talking about grooming. And that has now, over the years, especially since you last saw me, I've written so many courses on all types of abuse, all types of abuse, you know, and, you know, no one is born to be an abuser. Something happened in their childhood that caused this distortion in the brain that created trauma. And in the developing brain, that is really dangerous. As you well know, the cortisol spikes as a dangerous enzyme chemical, and that does actually destroy or breaks the neural pathways and destroys different brain cells. I'm going to get you something to show you what I mean. This is the lay version person, this is. So here we go. So there's and then I thought, right, because I decided we've got to look, if we want to have a healthier society, we've got to look at where does this stuff start? Where does poor mental health start? Well, 80% of it comes from childhood trauma. Where does obesity and these awful life-threatening illnesses come from? Held in trauma. There is a brilliant book called The Body Holds the Score. And it's all about the danger of holding in trauma. It will cause cancers. It can cause all sorts of issues later on in life, and tumors and horrible things, heart conditions. That if this here is a baby's brain and the baby pops out, the only way you could honestly prove that people are born like it, you'd have to take an MRI scan in every single child born and track their progress. Well, there is no evidence whatsoever to show you're born with it. But what happens is this little child is born into something, maybe it's just neglect, maybe it's because you can't dissect all the different abuses. There's something else I've learned. They all interlink. They're like the Olympic rings. So if you've got sexual abuse, there's going to be emotional abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse. It all links in. Yeah, you cannot separate it. So where there's domestic abuse, somewhere in the mix, there will be sexual abuse somewhere. And 50% of children in a domestic abuse situation are also targeted, right? So they're also targeted. So here we are. Here's the baby's brain. Some trauma happens. Maybe it's neglect. Maybe they're hearing mum and dad knocking out 7 bells of each other. And there you are. You're 3, 4, 5 years old, wherever. And your trauma. Dad's threatening to kill mum, blah, blah, blah. What must it feel like? Up spikes the cortisol. And that trauma is destroying neural pathways. It's eating away at the healthy brain cells. It distorts the landscape of the brain. There you go. And that child is going to go into a school, and I can assure you the global language is behavior. In the workplace, in school, the global language is behavior. How can that child act in a way that you and I, undamaged, unaffected by trauma? Yeah. So what are those things going to look like? They're going to be outside what would be the usual. You know, I look at people now in the workplace, people that are anorexic, people that are obese, people that are chain smoking, people that are alcoholics. It goes back to this. This is the reason, and nobody picked up on it. So when I go into prisons, I actually say to the prisoner,
I'm assuming that they don't necessarily remember their parents fighting or taking out.
Not necessarily. It depends when it happened. I've written a course now because I've been so concerned with lockdown of the impact. I mean, there will be people in lockdown who never knew they had a domestic abuse problem until they found themselves being locked up with someone all the time. You know, you go to work, he goes to work. Oh, you know, everything's fine. We meet up at weekends and a drink in the evening, and suddenly, ooh, you all stuck together. Maybe someone's furloughed, they get bored, somebody else has lost their job. Tremendous amount of trauma. So then if you've got a youngster, and I've written this course called Forgotten and Afraid, for let's not forget the children who have been, you know, maybe caught in be very knocked as a missile comes across the living room, It's something like 400 and something. No, hang on, was it 3? Terrible figures, and the figures of the impact of trauma in this lockdown, the whole year, they're not going to be coming out until later this year. So the figures are going to be astronomical. And even then, it won't be the real number, because 70, 60%, 70% is never recorded. There is a shame about somehow having to say you're in a domestic abuse. It took me years to be able to say, actually, my marriage is domestic abuse. And then I didn't want to tell anyone, because it is wrongly a shame. Why was I ashamed? It is horrible. It's terrible. And coercive control and gaslighting and all of that, it just drains you down and drags you down, so you can't really function. So I think these things should be made known to HR departments, people that are ever so anxious, and off with anxiety, people that are often off with really bad back pain, shoulders. I mean, it absorbs the stress. So where is that stress coming from? Because you can't get the potential out of people, and you can't get the full outcome that someone can give if they're struggling with this. If they're struggling with a court case that's got to go through, that will impact people. And the law is an arse, isn't it? So you never know which way it's going to fall. You never know which way it's going to fall. But so you can sink or swim. You have to make it. I think, unless you are, I think as a personality type, I was always a bit feisty. I was always a bit of a something about me. But then I was put down by my mother. So that is like an emotional abuse. I think my therapist called it a black narcissus. There's a lot of problems with a lot of mums and daughters. I think she was jealous of me. So then I became very, very shy and quite withdrawn, which wasn't my natural fit. And then, so inside me was always, as a youngster, I felt passionately about the vulnerable who weren't treated right. So when I was 8 years old, I was a member of the RSPCA, and then I became a member of St. John's Ambulance, and I felt I was quite a robust person and I could give something back. So that social conscience is very high in here and in my heart, that if I can make your life a bit better, I will do all I can. And that's what we do with freedom from abuse. So for me, this thing, out of pain comes our greatest calling. I have tried to walk away from it, but it still comes back and haunts me, and we've had people that have been identified as groomers, on and offline abusers, that we have successfully put behind bars. We've helped the people who are impacted by this. And I think the message is out there. I would love to say to everybody, this is not your blame. This is not your shame. Call it out. Find your voice and speak your truth. Organizations like us are so adept at doing it. We have an army of people, and with resilience, it is such an important facet. And I find that, dare I say it, today's parents, and not all, obviously, that would be wrong, but a lot of parents today, and I appreciate parents are busy. It's been horrendous with them trying to teach their children online. But even when I was teaching, I met too many parents. I call them helicopter parents. Always hovering, always trying to fix it. If the child hasn't been taught how to fix its own issues, even when they're young. So, for example, and you're going to think I was a really mean mother. I wasn't. I was teaching my children accountability and responsibility for the things that were relevant to their life. So my eldest son now, he's 40 now, but when he was 7, he wants to play for the school football team. And he went, okay, fine. So I said, well, what's that going to mean for you? He said, well, what do you mean, what's it going to mean for me? I said, well, I will take you and I will watch you, but I'm not going to clean your boots. I will teach you how to clean them, but you're going to clean them. I will wash your kit, but I'm not going to look for it. You're going to put it in the laundry basket. And you can tell the time. So on a Saturday morning, you're going to have to set the alarm clock. Is that a deal? Yeah, fine. Okay, so I take you. I will wash your kit. I'm not going to go and find it, and I will watch it. Okay, fine. And you're going to set the alarm. Right? All was going well. Then one day you forgot to set the alarm. And Mom. I went, tough. Won't do it again, will you? I didn't take him. And everyone, oh, that's really mean. That was a do. And you know, they are all, and I think all of them, because I called it tough love, you know, they all, so even when they had friends around, even when they were little, say 4 or 5 years old, and they had friends around and they all got the toys out, the Lego, whatever, I would always factor in 10. I mean, I had 4 children under 5, and I had a husband who was going down the pub. So, you know, I'd say, right, 10 minutes before mum comes, we're going to tidy this up. And my son would go, well, that's not fair. Well, whoever said it was fair? Why is it fair that I've got to do it? You had your friend round. I cooked tea. I'm happy to have your friend here. It is polite to tidy up the mess you created, or we don't have friends round. End of. Sort it.
Yeah. I think I used to call it healthy neglect with my lot.
I think that is absolutely right. And I find, you know, I mean, if you're always going to fix it for a child, if you're never going to have these sort of discussions with your child and just go with the flow because it's easier and quicker, then when they get to 11, 12 years old, how can they fix things? How can they fix their things that come their way that they have difficulty with? They don't know what to do it because mum and dad have always fixed it for you. You have to learn at an early age. This is the teacher in me. Learn at an early age how to self-manage yourself in the situations that are relevant to you. How do you take the knocks? You know, that's what resilience is. And I mean, a 2-year-old, this is where somehow along the line we lose this ability. So 14, so I got a little grandchild at the moment that's desperate to walk. You know, toddle, 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 boom. Toddle, 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 boom. But they don't sit down and go, done that, tried walking, didn't work, hit my head. I'll just sit down for the rest of my life then. They don't. They're up again, and they're up again and again and again until they get their first pair of shoes. Where does that go? That is resilience.
Yeah.
Why do we lose it? Who loses it for us? Is it life?
Do you believe that maybe with these that could be one of the reasons why we have this encroaching mental health problem in this country, where kids are not taught that resilience enough? I think
absolutely,
you know,
absolutely.
And also, you know, in schools maybe they pay lip service to it, but I can't help thinking that sometimes there's almost too much talk about anxiety and recognizing it and dealing with it, rather than actually just getting on with the process of life.
Exactly right. The more people go on, I have been so enraged about children in this country are going to have so much mental health problem. For goodness sake, you know, there may be, but if the more you say it, the more the children can own that statement. Oh, the anxiety in our children. Oh my goodness. Oh, should I be anxious? Oh, should I have mental health? Oh, so many of those children, my grandchildren went back to school yesterday. They couldn't wait. And if the schools handle it, manage it properly, which I believe they are doing, that let's write off this week as an academic thing. Let's just everybody get back to socializing and enjoying being together again. Children bounce back better than we think. They know more about life in some respects. They let things go quicker. And to keep banging on about this, I just find it, even us as adults, the moment those shops and bars are open again, we will bounce back. I really do believe, and it isn't helpful and it isn't healthy to keep going on about mental health. The mental health in this country is mainly caused by adverse childhood experiences. That's where it comes from, and it's that needs to be sorted out. That post-traumatic stress disorder, where does it come from? Where does it happen from? Why is it there? That's one thing I've gone on for years with my training course. When was the last time you looked at a child in your class acting in a different way, or a friend not being like you thought, and asked yourself why? People need to be inquisitive and concerned about their fellow man in my field. I mean, I think HR departments could do far more, I think, or should be trained far more in someone's off sick again, what they off sick with. Is there a reason for that? Is it, anxiety or depression? Where's it come from? Is it in the workplace, or is it something that came back from their past?
Yeah, the thing is, the trouble is, like, we were saying before I hit the record button earlier, that within the mental health, within the workplace, there is no legislation about having mental health awareness or whatever. It's a thing that you do because it's kind of a nice pretty thing, and it tends to come within the health and safety bracket. Now, if you slip on some oils, spilt oil in the factory, and you break your leg, there's a real burden of proof there. You know that there's that is a workplace accident. You break your leg. It's the fault of the workplace. There are protocols in place. You deal with it. You get your compensation. Blah de blah de blah. It's all there. The problem with mental health in the workplace is that there are, as you say, things that there are things that are happening in the home that the workplace might not know about. From what you've been talking about, the plasticine wall, which is the child's brain, is kind of gone all skew with. So even that person might not know that there's stuff going on there.
Absolutely.
But there are issues going on. That person is mentally ill in some way. As a consequence, they are not performing in their kind of to their best of their ability, which is probably as frustrating for them as it is for the workplace. Wherein lies the responsibility? How do we deal with that? There's a whole chain of things going on here, and where do we start?
Well, I think at every step of the way there needs to be a go-to.
I guess it's come from both ends and work in.
Yes, exactly. I think there needs to be, so even in the workplace, I think HR departments should be upskilled to not just say, oh, where's your sick note? But are you okay? What could it be? Offering another service or a signpost to where, I think there could be signage in workplaces where you can go and get, because it's not just a one-trick pony, is it? I mean, it might be if you've got an addiction, you might need to go to this, that person, whatever, and have facilitate those sort of things for people that, I mean, there's a hell of a lot of business guys in London that snort cocaine. Is that too much stress? Is it something else? It's a real concern. As to where it comes from, and not wanting to find that better life for themselves. It's quite extraordinary how some people, there's a wonderful book as well that one of our associates wrote, Wendy Richards. She wrote this book called The Mother's Betrayal, and her mum was horrendous, but the little girl, when she's now a lady, came back from South Africa about a year ago, but she wrote this book, and all the way through the book, even when she was 9 years old, she always had this belief, there's another life for me out there, and it's not this one. She never let it consume her. Does that make sense? Yeah. She always believed someday it will happen, and someday I'm going to keep making it happen. And she never gave up. And the moment you give up, you've lost. And I used to say to my children, however down someone is, never pull the rug from under them. And that rug is a thing called hope. If you give up hope, then you give up. And if you can just believe in however tough it is, storms past, that learn to dance in the rain, the sun comes out. It always does in the end, unless you're going to keep having this dark, gloomy, this is 2021. There are places to go, places and people that can help. It's just overcoming that horrible toxic shame and fear that someone's going to judge you. And that I know that's awful, because I felt that. I always remember as a little girl, the things that we say as well are very important. I can remember my mum, she had this mantra, you should be ashamed of yourself, right? Me particularly, apparently, because I was not her favorite girl. But I can still remember, the first thing I remember my mother saying to me was when I was 4 years old, and I had a little sort of little shorts, and they were turquoise with big white polka dots on and a matching top. And I was only just 4. He pooed my pants, and I was in the bathroom, and my mum, I can still remember standing there looking at her, and I can remember the window open, and she said to me, "You should be ashamed of yourself." I've never forgotten it. Never forgotten it. And it's weird how something like that, I mean, our biggest weapon, our greatest weapon is our mouth, our tongue. And it causes such terrible heartache. And also the thing is, we are all unique. We've all got different sensitivities. So some things people can just take that knock and bounce through life and come marching back. So, I mean, I could say if I slapped you around the face, you could turn around and we could have a real cat fight. Or I could slap you around the face and you could be broken. You don't know. So when people have suffered any form of abuse, because all abuse is awful, and it all comes from a negative root. Every time it comes from a negative root that's created this abuser. You know, it's oh, I've lost my train of thought now. I've lost my train of thought. Isn't that embarrassing? That's what age does for you. But it's oh, it's gone. It's gone. But what was that? Can you remember what I was going to say?
I don't know. Can I ask a question?
Am I?
No, last time I checked, you were the same person I was talking to 5 minutes ago. We're both okay at the moment. So, well, in terms of talking about the figures, what are the rates of abuse that are around in the UK? The reason why I asked this question is because there's probably a high possibility that if you're working in a company with, you know, 50, 100, 200 plus employees, there's going to be a proportion of them who will have had some kind of abuse in the past.
Absolutely right. So the current figures are, and this has been the same for ages, that 1 in 20 children are reporting child sex. Now, these reports are police records, okay? This isn't me just telling a friend. This is official, reported to the police on their database. 1 in 20 children are reporting sexual abuse, right? Now, at the moment, since I got the figures only yesterday for 2020, 200 reports a day of children reporting child abuse, sexual abuse. 200 a day. That's a lot.
That's from children.
That's from children reporting sexual abuse. 200 reports a day. Now, 70% doesn't get reported. So we won't know the fallout until we won't know. We will not know things like this. That the you know, the worst case scenarios are not going to come out till maybe later this year. But then after COVID reports, it'll throttle back to this, I think. But 1 in 5 adults report that they had some form of other abuse, right? So, you know, and 1 in 5 children are reporting other forms of abuse. So you got 1 in 5 adults. So a long time ago, I used to do my own little research when I had a load of adults in front of me. I used to say, right, okay, and I was trying to do sexual abuse then, right? So it was all, when we started very much with grooming and sexual abuse. And that obviously is because that's what we built our model on. But we now do domestic abuse, elderly abuse, children who abuse their parents, county lines and drugs, trafficking. I've got all sorts of courses, child sexual exploitation, you name it. I've got one on, which was sponsored by the Home Office, on what if your child is caught and charged and goes to a young offenders institute. And we trained 12,000 children across Bedfordshire in 2 months, January to the end of February last year. 12,000 children on what life behind bars is going to look like. Now make a decision for yourself. Now take responsibility. Are you really going to deal with those drugs or not? Because this is what you're looking at. You might be lucky for a few times, but your luck runs out. You know, so I did this thing and I said, like, can you just please put, it's a yes or no, a Y or an N at any level at all, whether it was a brush over your boobs or a grope or full rape or whatever that involved your private parts and a sexual assault of any degree. Can you leave a Y or an N on a piece of blank paper in that box? And it was coming out at 1 in 3. Consistently 1 in 3. Now that would, you know, literally goes on with the 1 in 5 that's reported. Realistically, you know, it's a horror story. Really, it's a horror story. And I get really upset with people that still want to have their head in the sand, you know. And when people say, I think this is what I was going to say, actually, I remembered it. When people say, oh, all you had was this and all you had was that, and my abuse was worse, you can't say that. Because you don't know the impact on that person. I have a friend who, she's now 65, that when she was 12, she was in a library in Surrey, and this man groped her and flashed and everything else. And she was highly anxious for decades, right into her 50s. You can't say, oh, all he did was. You can't say that. Well, you can say it, but it has no bearing on reality. You know, it's just people don't want to face. I get sometimes when I go on the media and they go, oh, you know, oh, I really don't want to have to talk about this. I said, but you're going to have to talk about it, because kid you not, every single person knows someone who's abusing. It is that prevalent. It is a pandemic for which no one puts any money into it. We spent billions trying to find a vaccine. Child sexual abuse, forget it. Child abuse, forget it. You just paper over the cracks with 1 million here, 2 million there, but we don't want to go right down to the grassroots and see why that tree isn't growing. So when I go into a prison, first thing I say to them is, number one, don't start manipulating me, because I'm telling you now, I will report you. I am here for a sensible conversation. And also, I mean, most of them are very articulate. They've been very well educated. They've had good jobs. They deliberately chose careers so they could work with children. At the age of about 16, they were choosing careers.
So do they talk about it quite openly? And
oh gosh, yes.
They are rational about what they do.
Oh Lord, yeah, quite rational. And they say, you know, if parents actually understood what we're doing, grooming, until they step up to the line. I mean, we would never try it in front of you. You'd sniff it out straight away. But we don't even have to knock on the door. The door is wide open, because most parents don't want to have to think about it. And that's the saddest thing, is that the courses we are doing are out there, highly informative, that people still don't want to know it. And yet I'm currently mentoring a family in Seattle who, and when I was training them the other night, you know, nighttime here, daytime there, their heads were in their hands because they had seen all these behaviors, and it's in plain sight. These quirky little things you think are not quite right, in plain sight. And they were like devastated that they'd been. I said, well, it's designed that you miss it. And it's designed that you always think of this person, oh, they're always a bit like that, you know, a bit quirky. That's the whole, their dubious charm, you know. But it's very sad when you are to deal with parents who just were living in their lovely little bubble where these people don't really exist. Yes, they do. They're in every street. And the online abuse and the offline abuse has now, it used to be thought that 1 in 3 excuse me, 1 in 3 online abusers were doing it offline. But now, if you're doing it online, they're doing it offline. It's all merged together. And it is a horror story. So just in October alone, I get a lot of figures from the Internet Watch Foundation. Just from October alone, there were in the UK, right? In the UK, there was a minimum of 8.8 million attempts to access child sexual abuse images, just in 4-week periods in the UK alone. It's a real problem. You know, this is manageable if people understood social media better, if people took responsibility that it's their child that's going to get harmed. And if they've put their children's photos out there, naked bathing or whatever, when they're babies, you could have not done that. And it's easier to stop that. Still, the greatest enemy is in your living room. Every time it's in your living room, without a doubt, without a doubt. So, you know, those numbers, I think once we've got over the peak and all the stuff that is going to inflate the figures, I think then we'll find in a couple of years' time, sadly, it'll go back to as it is. It's just the situation that's caused all these issues, but the brokenness in society is horrendous, and adults need to be helped, because then they will, I mean, our new patron, Stephen Endelman, he lives in LA, but he went to a prep school. He's a Jewish guy. He went to a Jewish prep school, Carmel College. It's now closed in London. And he and some guys, when they were older, managed to get the abuser put away for 17 years. Well done. But then about 6-7 years ago, he got the most horrendous, very unusual brain cancer. And he was in hospital for a year, and they had to take out his bone marrow, wash it, put it back in again. And he wondered when he recovered and he was in recuperation, why on earth this happened. And he put it down to his traumatic abuse, because he said he never faced it. The trauma was in there. And being put in a boarding school, he was just sent away by his mother. The mother was getting married. So that in itself was a trauma. So then the abuse happened. So it's trauma on trauma. So he had complex PTSD. And so it went on. And it's true. These life-threatening illnesses are caused by held-in trauma from adverse childhood experiences. And it's very, very sad. Now, you're always going to miss some, but in this day and age, we should absolutely be majoring on childhood adverse experiences and harm, because that is when you get to the workplace. If it hasn't been dealt with, it's a global language. I mean, it's there to see. If you know how it's there to see. Is the person sat next to you in the next work pod, are they always smoking? Are they neurotic? Are they overly skinny, overly big? Are they comfort eating? Are they not eating? It's all there in your face.
Yeah, but then it comes back down to the problem is of how friendly is your workplace to,
yes, absolutely,
then kind of flag these up. And who do you go to? Ultimately, you go to your HR, you go to your boss, you go to whoever, who themselves are,
ill-equipped, basically ill-equipped. They're ill-equipped, and it's no one's fault. It's about a relevant lack and an appropriate lack of training. We went, so say for example, I've always said this, say I'm CEO of some investment bank, and my PA is off having her baby and she's on maternity leave, and back she comes and she has childcare and all that, and then oops, she's chosen auntie and uncle to do it or something, and uncle has taken a fancy to the child. Your PA finds out she's going to be on sick leave for at least 2 years. So my idea was to get into the workplace and get in there and talk to the banks about various and the all sorts of corporations, to go in and talk. So if your child, say your child was involved in county lines, you don't just have to be living on a council estate. Plenty of the well brought up kids are also doing this, because what they're suffering from is also neglect, emotional neglect, because a lot of their parents, you've got nannies, you've got butlers. I've worked in independent schools. I know you've got an absence of real parental interest, because I used to call them professional parents. Somebody else can do the job. So, I know a girl that was she was running county lines. Her mother owned 7 different yoga clinics in London. And she had a £3-4 million penthouse suite, and 13-year-old girl was always left on her own. And there she was with jewellery, new trainers, everything, running drugs. So, I mean, parents should be stepping up to learn this stuff. You are responsible for the human being that you push out into this world. And whether you find it palatable or not is not on the radar. It's not part of the equation. You are accountable for parenting. And I get very, very quick. A number of free courses we offered out during lockdown, saying, please come online for 40 minutes with your child for free to learn what your child may be doing while you're working from home in lockdown. You think you don't know what they're upstairs on their devices. You don't know what they're doing. They could be doing all sorts of sexual acts over live streaming on their webcam. You're not there to watch them. If you don't know the dangers, you are not being an appropriate parent. We didn't get one person to sign up. Not one. Not one.
That's really interesting.
And that is an abdication. That's an abdication of responsibility.
That to me smacks almost that you don't want to know, because that leads you down a rabbit hole that you don't want to go down. So
exactly. And then you get the calls. Oh, the number of parents I had call me where their children had done just this. Horrified. Oh my God. Yeah. Oh, did you ever see the free course? It's sad. It's so sad. But you know, it's really important that resilience and the awareness of this is brought into workplaces, because there's so much brokenness there with people. You know, and it's so very sad, and we can be doing so much more. It's not like, oh, it shouldn't be like all that input ends when you're about 15. You have to keep on doing it.
That's absolutely amazing. I think that we will talk some more, because I think that we can start to push this a little bit more through the workplace as well. I don't know how much you've done so far, but I think that'd be great to pick up on that, and certainly with what I'm doing.
Yes.
There's certainly a channel there that would be really good
for sure
to use for you.
For sure, I think so. I think so. And as I said to you earlier, before we went on filming, I mean, a relative of mine lost her father, and she didn't even have compassionate leave, and she was in senior management. I mean, how on earth can you make rational decisions when you know? You don't know. Maybe your wife has just died of cancer and you've got 4 children, and there you are, head of some big massive head of Shell or Esso or whatever, and you're still going to have to make decisions around that board table. I mean, is that right? Is it? Do they have? Is it? I do think. I mean, is it part of health and safety? I don't know. Is it part, or is it? Should there be a whole little? It should health and safety link in with HR? Should there be? That is that, if you like, emotional healthcare worker.
I think that's the thing, and I think that there are a lot of conversations going on at the moment as to where it fits in, and whether it's like a, you know, almost like a tick box ticking exercise where, you know, that's done and that's done, and yet we've done that too. But actually it's more than that, because you're talking about people's lives. And you know, whereas there need to be that kind of financial kickback, so that you understand that there is a you know, you're talking also to the money men, aren't you? Because ultimately, who pays for this? And then there is a financial element to it. There's a cost to it. There's a cost to creating this awareness, and that cost has to come from somewhere. You know, and so
this is where the government sits, though, isn't it? Really. I mean, they should. I know our MP is very involved in trying to reduce suicide rate and mental health. But you can try and reduce suicide rates and mental health. But if you're going to do it from the top down, it's not going to work, because there's another wave of people that are going to come up, and it's quite heavily men.
You're just firefighting all the time, aren't you? You're
always firefighting, and it doesn't matter what you say. Dig down deep. If my tree is not growing properly, and then I put another little tree in there, then I'm going to take it up by the roots and look at the soil. Should I not be planting it there? What is wrong? Do I treat the soil? That's what we're not doing. We're not doing it at the earliest stage. And it just is not rocket science. It's not difficult to sort. It just takes some people with some brains, instead of just churning out the same old. If you do what you always did, you'll get what you always got. And for me, every government has done the same. Let's sign a check off, send it out to the same old people, the same old boys club that are joined to their hip. Oh, let's give it to NSPCC, Bernardo's. Let's, there, chuck it there, chuck it there. Oh, that business over there, or youth offending, they can have that. They don't stop and think, is there a better way? Is there somebody else that could be brought to the table that's got a voice? People that are out there at the coalface. So we're doing, I'm so irritated by this. I'm actually doing a conference on next week, actually, for young people, and it's all being funded by Lee Day Law Firm. And it is for young people, just 15-minute punchy speakers, most of them young, and to say, look, here's the issues, instead of these stale male, pale men in Westminster telling what are perfectly articulate, bright young people how their life is going to be. Why don't they hear it back? This is what we feel about our life. These are the fears we've got. This is what needs to be done. Are perfectly articulate people in our universities that should be having a voice. And I feel passionate. Our future, yours and my future, is in the hands of this generation of young people.
Yeah.
And my grandchildren's is,
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's important that we do the best we can for the very best outcomes.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't just stop at school. It has to get into those workplaces, definitely.
Marilyn, it's been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you for having me on.
There is so much there that I'm going to start unpicking. Thank you, Marilyn.
No, thank you for your time.
So just if workplaces that I will start feeding your stuff through what I do, through the program that I do. But if companies wanted to work direct with you, could they bring you in to do?
Yes. To us, it's just another organization like a school.
Yeah.
It's just another, and of course now I think what the good thing that's come out of COVID is the use of technology.
Yeah, we all know how to do it now.
Yeah, you don't have to spend a fortune paying for people's travel expenses.
Yeah.
It's perfect sense. And I'm going to put you in touch with someone as well.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you very much.
Thank you ever so much. Have a good day. Thank you ever so much, Kate. Talk to you again soon.
Just stay on a minute, Marilyn.
Okay.
I'll just stop recording.